Okay guys, so today we're going to actually write our first class file. Okay, so we already have written it, but now we're actually going to type it into an IDE. So this IDE is called Dr. Java. Okay? So again, we're going to start off with our class file header. Okay? We're going to call this our first class. Okay? Okay, and remember, how we write our main method, public static void main string args, okay? And so this is just an experimental little bit, so I'm using a projector onto the whiteboard right now. Eventually I will use a screen recording software, so you do not have to worry about the quality of the video, since the quality currently is probably pretty terrible. Okay, so this is going to be our experimental video. So last time I told you I was going to teach you more about methods, and so that is exactly what we're going to do. So here is our thing. And so last time I told you about objects. This time I'm going to teach you about how to make an object as well. Okay? So I'm going to call this first object. Okay? This is our first object. Remember how I told you about the constructor method? So it's the same name as the class file. Okay? Over get your there you go. Okay, so what variables do we want our first object class to have? Well, let's say we want our first object class to just have a just to have an int. Maybe we'll call it int val. Okay, we're just going to declare it. Okay, and then here we're going to say int my val. Let's say val is equal to my val. Okay. All right. So that is our constructor class. Okay. Now let's create our first actual method. Okay. So you're going to have the visibility, public or private, right? And then you're going to include the return type, so void, int, double, so on and so forth. So in this case, we want to actually return the integer value of val. We're going to call it get val. So then you have the name, and then you have parameters. And so for this one, we're actually not going to have any parameters. Okay, so it's going to be so it's got no parameter method. And so all it's going to do is we're going to put what's called a return statement here. So we're going to write return, and then we're going to write val. And so what this means is that this is our return type. So our method is going to return a variable of type integer, and in this case our variable is called val, and so this is the variable that we are going to return. And so let's actually test it by writing first object, just like we did with string. We'll call it obj is equal to new first object. Okay, and then we'll put in a number. And so actually, why don't I make it so that the user can interface with it? You don't need to know this, okay? So I'm just going to import. So an import allows you to take certain classes and objects that have already been made for you, and then you import them into your class, and then you can use them to manipulate your code. And so in this case, I'm going to import what's called a scanner class. So this class has already been written for me, okay? I just need to use it. And so the methods, like such as nextInt, have already been written in the scanner class file. I just need to import it into my class, into my first class file in order to actually use it. Okay? And so I guess something similar would be, say, if I were to say import. I guess I could say yada yada yada, and then it would be something, and then it would be first object. Okay, that's just an example. Okay, so it would be something like that. Okay. So in Dr. Java, it's a little bit different. You just need to open it up like this. So and something like Android Studio, what you would do is when you create a project, and then you create a class file within a certain folder, that is called a package. And so it packages, and it would be something like this. Package, and then you would have the file location. And so if you were to have a file folder levels that was like org.first inspires.ftc.teamcode, okay, that's saying that you have that your code is stored in the folder team code, which is underneath the folder ftc, which is in the folder first inspires, which is in the file called org. Okay, and then package. When you say package, it just means that that is the location of your class file, and that your class file should have access to anything within that, to any code that is in that package. Okay. Dr. Java immediately does that for you as long as you have all of the files open right here. So Dr. Java is a special IDE. That was just an explanation as to why I need to import and what import is and how I can use the code from other class files. Okay. If you want to learn more about that, you can look up stuff like how to use Android Studio, VS Code, and other things like that. Okay. All right. And so our first object obj, go to a new first object, and then we're going to take a user input of type int, and then we're going to just print that object. And so see how we don't actually have an integer stored here? I can't just do sc.nextInt. Why can't I do that? Oh, first I actually need to create the scanner. My bad. There we go. When I say system.in, it's sort of like system.out. System.out prints it out of the system, prints it out to the system. In takes in a value from the system. Okay, that's all that is. And then this is the system, right here. All right. So what we're going to do is we're just going to print. So you see how we don't actually have an integer that takes up this that is instantiated with this data sc.nextInt? Well, we can't just say sc.nextInt right here, because then we're just scanning for another integer. Okay, we're taking in another input that isn't actually the value. Okay, so in this case, what we do is you know how we created the method getVal? Well, we can use that method to actually get. And so when you call a method from a class, so here's your object, right? Obj. So when you call a method from an object like this, you do dot, okay, dot like this, and then you do the name of the method, and then you do the parameters. And so in this case, there are no parameters. So it's just like that, all right? So it's just like this. So if I were to have a string, right, like that, right? Basically, if I were to do res.say that, so this is the method, char at, and this is the parameter. It takes in an integer value and returns the character at that index. And so this is index 0, this is index 1, and then this is index 2, and so this method would actually return y. Okay? And so let's compile. Code will be stored in this Dr. Java file, alright? And first object. Okay. So as I said before, remember how I said the class file, the name of the class file is also just the name of the file, right? The name of your class is also just the name of your file, okay? The name of your document. So in this case, the name of our class is first object, so the name of our file, of our document file, is firstobject.java, and this is firstclass.java, okay? Pretty simple, right? So now we've compiled it, we're going to run our code. And so here is our scanner. We're going to take in an input. Let's say we're going to input the number 7. And so look, it returns 7. Okay? Now, let's create another method. So let's say I want to create a method that returns a manipulated value of val. And so let's create int there. So let's say we want, so our new method to get val added returns a type integer. So we need to include a return statement. In a return type of void, you do not need to include a return statement, and that's the reason why our main method doesn't actually have a return statement anywhere here. And that is okay because it is of return type void. I'll discuss static in a little bit, alright? Okay, so let's return. We'll return val plus add. And so what will this do? Let's just add parentheses around that. Sure. So what will this method do is it actually returns the value that you get when you add val to when you add the integer add to val. Okay? And if we want to actually manipulate the value of val, we can say val is equal to val plus add. Or we can actually simplify that even more to val plus equals add. And so val equals val plus add is the same thing as val plus equals add. Alright? And so if we want the actual value of val to be manipulated, then we can actually do this. And then after that, we don't even need to include val plus add. We can just say val. Right? But we just want to get the value of val when a number is added. We don't actually want to manipulate it. We can make another method of type void. Okay? We can call it set val added int add. Okay? And in this one, we don't need a return statement. Instead, we'll just do val plus equals add. Done. No return statement needed. If you want, you can do return nothing, but don't include a return statement. So if I do something like this, return an empty string, what happens is that it actually says error. Void methods cannot return a value. You see? But if I remove that, compile, the compiler says it's okay. Why? Because I'm not returning anything. You don't need to include that. If you want to, it's fine. But in a void method, you don't need a return statement. In fact, you shouldn't have a return statement at all. And so what happens if I remove this return statement? What's the compiler going to say now? Well, it's going to say syntax error. Insert assignment operator expression to return to complete expression. Because that isn't actually a statement. So if I say, alright, so I want this to be val plus equals add. Alright, so if we change this from void to int, right? Let's see what happens. This method must return a result of type int. And you see how we're not returning anything? That's because it has to return the type. And since it's void, we're not returning anything. Okay? Let's go into first class. Alright. Okay, so I've written out the rest of the code, and so we're using the new methods that we've written to first things first is we're creating a new integer called new val, and we're going to instantiate it with the value of our previous val plus our user input, okay? And then next we're going to do is we're just going to print our original val, because remember how it doesn't actually change the value of val, it just returns the value that you would get if you add to val, right? And then we're going to just separate it with new val, which is assigned the value of val plus add, okay? And then here what we're doing is we're doing new val minus the object.getVal. What does this mean? Well, new val minus obj.getVal, that is just the same thing as what our user had inputted beforehand, because this is our original value of obj, right? Just our value of obj, of our obj val, right? Of val. So if it were 7, and then if we added 3, this would be 10. So 10 minus 7 is 3. And so if our add was 3, then that would give us our 3. And so set val added is actually going to change the value of val to 7 plus 3. Okay? And then we're going to print it out. Alright, so let's run this code and I will show you exactly what I mean. So if I put in 7, see how it returns 7? So it's still printing out get val first. Now if I do 3, it prints out 7, 10. Okay? Okay, so this is val. This is still val, but this is our val plus add. but our value of val is still 7. You see how even though I added the 3, right? You see how even though we ran this method, get val added, our value of our, you see, if I remove this, right, it might be easier to understand. Okay, you see? So we did get val added, and you see how the value of val didn't change at all? That's because our method does not manipulate the value of val. Okay? And then here, we are actually manipulating the value of val. And so what happens is that when we call get val now, the value has changed. Alright? So I hope that makes sense to you. Alright? So that was our method experimentation. Okay, so now let's discuss what does this static mean. Well, static just means that if I were to say create a new class file, we'll call this public class driver. Okay. So then I'll create my main method. And so a static method just means that you can call the method. So normally when you call a method, it needs an object in order for the method to be called. I can't just say here, like if I do first object like this, if I do that, let's save that. You see how it says cannot make a static reference to the non-static method getValAddedInt from the type first object. Okay, what does that mean? It means that we cannot call this method with the name of the class. But if I were to do something like this, first class dot main. So don't worry about what that means, okay? So don't worry about what this is. I'm just creating a string array, an empty string array, just to pass through the parameter, right? Because you need to pass through the parameter. So basically, what I'm doing is I'm calling the main method, okay, of the first class, and then inputting just an empty array. So basically, I'm just passing the parameter through easily. It's not actually reading it. But if I run this, what this program will do is look, it's actually running the main method of our first class file. And why is that? Well, because main is a method. It's just a normal method of the first class file. And so I can make a static reference to it like this. Okay? So first class dot main, basically I'm calling it using a static reference, meaning that I'm calling it using the name of the class file rather than creating an object of type first class. But what if I were to click run here at this? Static error. This class does not have a static void main method accepting a string array parameter. Okay? Now, you cannot run a program if it doesn't have a main method, if there is no driver class. You cannot run an object class file. You can only run a driver class file, a class file that has a main method. Otherwise, your code will not run. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the just going over some code, and hopefully in the future I will get that screen recorder up so you don't have to worry about the low quality projector and everything like that. Alright? So I hope you learned something here, and I'll see you in the next video.